Hello, and welcome to the Commons and Conversation. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Andrew Simon, Editor-in-Chief of the Chronicle of Philanthropy. The Commons is our project to look at all of the ways that nonprofits and foundations can close fissures in our society. And this is by gender, generation, geography, race, everything that is keeping our country from getting important things done. We're very much interested in the efforts philanthropy and nonprofits are making to bring people together, strengthen a sense of community, and tackle polarization. We are so thrilled to have Mónica Guzmán here with us today. Mónica is the author of I Never Thought of It That Way, How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times. I believe it just came out in paperback. She's also a journalist, a senior fellow for public practice at Braver Angels, a nonprofit organization dedicated to depolarizing America, and host of a Braver Way podcast. She's based here in the same city as I am, Seattle. Welcome, Mónica.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to see a fellow Seattleite.
That's right. I know. We could technically be in the same place, but virtual works as well.
It does indeed.
Well, thanks again so much for being here. For starters, maybe you could just tell our audience about the type of work that you do through Braver Angels.
Yeah, so at Braver Angels, we work on political depolarization. So our mission is to help strengthen our democratic republic by bringing people together across the political divide. So it's not about changing people's views on the issues. It's about changing people's views on each other so we can tackle the issues at all. There's this huge sort of drought of trust among people, among neighbors, among people in their own community, just around the political divide. Like, we know that there's many other differences where there's so much distrust and so much suspicion. The political divide has become this extremely potent kind of difference that is really challenging people's ability to see each other, understand why people come to believe what they believe, and most importantly, come together to fruitfully solve or make progress on the debates that really challenge us. Due to a lot of the toxic parts of political polarization, we tend to have debates that aren't even the real debates because we're not coming close enough to each other to see what the real debates are all about. We're getting a lot of signals from rhetoric, from media, from politicians who are driven in different directions. Let's win elections, let's get eyeballs, right? But in this society, we need to make sure we understand each other so we can work together.
You mentioned the election, and you've been doing this work through several election cycles now. I know we're just about a month since the results, but is there anything different about this current election cycle and the outcome? Anything that feels different to you?
Yes. The last month has been a real opportunity to observe, what happens when these things that we all have a voice in, but we can't control the outcome of, come to pass in our political process. So in this case, one thing I observed was the impact of fear in the campaign in particular. Fear is such a strong mobilizer. If you're afraid, then you can't let go of a thing, and you're going to go to the polls and make sure that you vote in a way that keeps the scariest things from happening. As someone who works in depolarization, I'm in a lot of mixed spaces, and I've talked with people on all sides of the political divide, and I saw how the campaigns, all of them, raised the fear so they could raise the stakes and make sure that they got people to the polls. So one thing I kind of knew would happen was whoever lost, that side was going to have to reckon with the fear that they now have to face. The winning side was going to be spared the cost of that. We won, everything's fine, like our country's going to be the way we want it to be. But due to the elevated rhetoric, this election in particular felt like the fear got up so high that the last month, for a lot of folks who happen to be on my political side, the left, it's so much pain, it's so much fear, a lot of which is well-founded given the issues, given the real divides. This is not to diminish those issues. But the cost of fear neurobiologically is that you can't wonder about something you think is out to get you. It is harder to get curious when you're afraid. and it's harder to exercise good judgment. You're mostly thinking about survival. And so it's a kind of freeze, right? Everybody just, it's easier to go to despair. It's easier to go to immobilization. It's easier to just not know what to do. But I believe that, it's true for this election. It was true for all the elections. The election every 4 years is our best user experience survey of the country. It is the only one that is oh so comprehensive. It still doesn't get everybody, obviously, but it gets a lot of us. There's so much to learn. There's so much to learn. So the impact of fear keeps us from wanting to get close enough to see, like, wait, what actually happened here? What can I understand about the state of my country? What can I understand about people who disagreed with me and where they want to take things? And maybe could we work together? Could I advance some of my goals even if my side lost, right? These are the kinds of questions that would be really cool to put into circulation. And I'm kind of hoping, I'm seeing people get there bit by bit.
You've obviously written about this. You've spoken about this. You're an expert on this. But when you talk about fear, what are some strategies that might help push through that fear as a way, again, to make connections among people? And if you have any examples of that, recent or not, it'd be great to hear them.
Yeah, one thing that really works is to be specific. A lot of times when we are feeling afraid of something, political or otherwise, we'll be tempted to talk in abstract, cosmic terms. The end of everything, right? The end of democracy, the end of something huge that we value. The problem with that sort of broad-based language is there's nothing to do. It's difficult to get a grip on something that we can actually hang on to as a kind of guardrail or a specific step. So get specific, right? If you're afraid of something that's going to happen, if you're afraid of, a good example might be the judicial system. Both sides have cases to make, the way they see it about how the judicial system could be used against them or against their candidates, or already has been or has already been corrupted. So think about that. I'm worried about the independence of the judicial system. I'm worried about what's going on with our judges. Okay, like that gets us a little bit closer to the ground. What could we do about it? We're citizens, we are active, powerful people, and we can always work on guardrails. So that's one thing about fear. Another one is, this is really important. After this election in particular, but after all such elections, often what happens is that people start to believe my side's fears are real. Their side's fears are imagined and hyperbole. And that's not true. It's never that simple. What's probably closer to the truth is that both sides have fears that are really based on, serious concerns underneath them that ought to be looked at, and some that are exaggerated and hyperbole. So which is which? The process of discernment is really important, but it really has to begin with not falling into that trap of thinking that all my side's fears are real and all of their fears are completely silly and made up. Let's not laugh at each other's fears. If you're having conversations across the divide and somebody, says something that you're like, that's just crazy, try not to say that. Even if you think it in that moment, it's not crazy to them. It really, really isn't. So ask questions, get curious. I'd love to know where that comes from for you. Like, what sorts of things are you concerned about there? Because it's not something I'm seeing, but, maybe it's a relative, like, I care about you. Like, I want to know what you're thinking, like what's going on, right? So really resist that temptation to laugh at other people's political fears.
What's the role, maybe the best role that philanthropy can play when it comes to depolarization in this work, particularly thinking about the fact that there might be some fatigue, right? Whether it's on the giving side and even the nonprofits that philanthropy supports, right? There could be understandable fatigue with this work. So I'm just kind of wondering if you have any thoughts on the best role that philanthropy can play to kind of help continue this work.
Yeah, my bias has always been toward grassroots, real people and real impact. I think one of the things I've observed can, philanthropy, journalism, all these institutions can get kind of carried away with is scale. We want scale. We want metrics that show us that lots of people are liking this on Instagram, and that's what matters, and that's how we know that this is working. No, Those metrics are so not really a great measure of impact. I think that the closer philanthropy can get to the ground, the more wide open folks in philanthropy can be about what's actually making a difference in people's lives. Where are the testimonies that back that up? Sometimes I've seen some very, very, very small projects like really make a difference. Scale that, and don't scale that by slapping it on social media. Scale that by empowering people to then bring it into their own communities. So that's what we need. I think we need a philanthropy that can kind of ask itself what is that human level, because only at that human level, the one-to-one conversation, the smallest units of connection, can we build trust at all. All these other places where we think we're building trust, it's often too performative. It's not going to be as impactful as it looks from the outside. And if you actually query the people behind the keyboard, maybe they weren't paying that much attention. Maybe not that much was going on. So I'm a big fan of that. And I would really encourage folks, look at the organizations that are doing grassroots work and have a high level of scrutiny. Is it working? How do they know? What are the metrics that actually reflect a deep impact on people's ability to build trust where it is hardest to do so? This should not be easy. It is extremely difficult, and we need to empower the best innovation.
Are there any examples that come to mind of grassroots efforts? Maybe something that felt like it started really small, really modest, super local perhaps, but felt like it turned into something?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my bias, of course, is Braver Angels. Started as a grassroots organization and has grown to 100 chapters across the country. And it's volunteer led. It's people on the ground, chapters that are co-led by people who are conservative and people who are liberal. And we really take that very seriously all the way down our levels of leadership. But there's also organizations like, for example, Bridge USA. Bridge USA does extraordinary work at the college and high school level, run by people in Gen Z, really young people who are just as tired as the rest of us about the status quo here and what's become so toxic, bring a lot of fresh energy. It's remarkable when I go to Bridge USA events on college campuses, the debates that they have on college campuses, which the headlines have been talking about how completely dysfunctional is discourse on college campus. It's such a battleground for these things that we can't solve. You go to a Bridge USA debate and you see college students actually tango with the hardest issues right across the room from somebody who completely disagrees with them. And they're leading an extraordinary movement right there with Braver Angels. And there's others as well. Future Caucus is a great organization that is working to help young people get elected into public office and then organize them around some cross-partisan types of initiative that can really, elevate the discourse and all of our politics. I could go on and on and on, but there's some really great efforts going on out there.
What do people get wrong about doing this work? Even those with good intentions who are endeavoring to, eradicate this toxic polarization. Are there common missteps? I mean, do people kind of commonly get things wrong, even with good intentions?
Yeah, there's a lot of really good intentions, and I think there's a lot of unseen intentions that come out kind of here and there in different ways. So I've seen, some folks come passionately into pluralism work, bridge building work across the political divide, and there's a motive that they had that maybe they didn't recognize or realize, which is, I really just want to educate the other side. They're wrong and they're stupid, and we got to change them. That that doesn't work. It becomes pretty transparent pretty quickly. And, it comes from a good place, right? We all think we're right. We all think that we have the best judgments and we all want to make the world a better place. And it's easy to think we make the world a better place by just doing everything we can to convince everybody that we're right. The science of persuasion, the research into human dynamics across those kinds of disagreements show that even if it's true, let's say, Andrew Simon, you have all the answers to everything. Even if that's true, if you went around and just tried, everything you did was just informed by, I want to convince this person, it would fail. What we need to do is receive people and build up our capacity to receive people just as they are, so that we can connect, so that we can discuss the best ideas without people having their own motives to slap them down as a sort of defense. We have to get out of that win-lose mode to be able to have honest conversations at all. So that's a really big thing I think a lot of folks get wrong, is even if you are right, even if you do have all the answers on your political side, which I don't think that's true of either side. Even if you've got to put listening first. You've got to put humility first. You've got to know what that looks like. And you've got to open your eyes to everything you don't know and everyone you don't understand.
And for the record, I, Andrew Simon, definitely do not have all the answers. Perfectly clear and out there. So you have a personal attachment to this work through your family. Again, I know you've written and spoken about it. I'm just wondering, for the audience and the uninitiated, if you might talk a little bit about how you've come at this, just again, in a personal way.
Yeah, so very informed by my relationship within my family. I'm a Mexican immigrant, and so are my parents. They brought me and my brother over when I was about 5, 6 years old. And when I turned 17, they passed their citizenship test and they became US citizens. So now we're all dual US-Mexico citizens. And it was in the year 2000 that they cast their first votes on US soil and went Republican. And I, in 2004, the first time I could vote for president, I went very Democrat. And it's been that way ever since. So it's been a rollicking ride through, I feel like because we speak Spanish and we grew up in New Hampshire, in a place where there weren't that many other Hispanics, we could be at restaurants speaking at a higher volume than normal, because to everybody else, it was just gibberish. So we had loud conversations debating what Glenn Beck said last night, or what was going on with Clinton or with George W. Bush. But in 2016, with that presidential campaign, our family was tested like so many other families have been across the country. And looking back, I can definitely see that the one with the most angst was me. I had a really hard time understanding why my parents, supported the candidate that supported and went on to vote for him now 3 times. And it became just a challenge in our relationship. But the reason I wrote my book and do the work that I do is because, as I like to say, I think we kept it to a simmer. What I've learned from all my sort of obsessive research is that heat in a conversation is good. Heat in a disagreement, friction between points of view, really good, sharpens you. It's awesome. Let's do it. The question is, are you cooking something or are you burning something with that heat? And if you're burning something, you're burning a sense of dignity. You're burning a sense of safety. Now you're in fear where you can't be curious. You're burning trust in a relationship that you care about, which has devastated some families. But if you can keep it to a simmer, if you can pick up some of the skills and tools that help you do that, and they're honestly not rocket science. They're really, really, really not. They're mostly how to human. That's it. It's just how to human. And if you can do that, then you can keep those disagreements to a simmer. And that's what ended up happening with me and my parents. So, we ended a part of that whole conflict with me understanding that if I had been my parents, I would have voted for Trump too. It just added up. It just made sense. And I was able to kind of understand that. And it helped me understand myself and helped me understand the country a bit better too. So, again, it's a very, very difficult thing, and things can get hot really easily. But there are ways to cool it down, and they're not as difficult as it may seem.
You're talking about cooking and simmering. It's the holiday season. We're going to be in our kitchens with our families. Yeah. These debates are happening. How, maybe one pointer on cooling it down, right? Is there something even just in the family dynamic you'd recommend as people spend time with their families about, again, cooling things down to a simmer?
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about anger for a bit. There's the anger that you sense in yourself, and there can also be the anger that arises in this person you're talking to. An author who I really deeply respect, Valerie Kaur, said, anger is a force that protects that which is loved, which is a great entry point to me to how we can be curious even about anger. What are you trying to protect? So if you find yourself getting angry, take that as information, take that as data, and maybe try to vocalize it. So if you're in that conversation, you find yourself getting angry, it's impeding your ability to really listen. It's impeding your ability to want to stay in the conversation. But maybe you feel okay enough to say something like, just want to let you know, I'm feeling upset about this. Like, this is making me upset. But I want to stay and I want to keep listening. You just might see me get a little bit stiff or a little bit still for a minute, but let me think on it while we're here together. If you sense anger in another person, one thing that can diffuse it really effectively, and this is not a script, I'm not giving you a script. This is just like an example to illustrate the point. But this has happened to me, and I've seen folks get really, really, really mad, especially in places where I didn't expect it. And if I say what I'm observing, and I say something like, I didn't realize this mattered so much to you. Can you tell me more about that? Whoa, like someone's just acknowledged the anger. Someone's just invited whatever the anger is trying to defend into the conversation from a calmer place. And I have seen people's shoulders just go down. I've seen people sigh it out when they realize that someone is actually interested in hearing whatever the heck is making them so animated. And then they'll take a breath sometimes and they'll just say, I don't know. I think it's just this, I think it's just this thing about immigration or abortion that I just can't, and then you can connect on that human level and you can go out of the argument and into, yeah, I get it. That is kind of tough. And you cool it down.
Well, Monica, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a terrific conversation. Your book is excellent. I just read it recently. What well-timed reading. So I'd encourage anyone to read it. Thank you again so much for being here with us.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.